Hi everyone, and welcome to today's recording about Chapter 10, which is all about buying, using and disposing. Now this is going to carry on from our discussion last week about the steps in the decision-making process. So as a result of your reading this week, you should understand the following things. You should have a good understanding of the 5 contextual effects on buying and disposal, and just understand that they're also sometimes referred to as situational influences. You should understand how the purchase environment influences our consumer buying processes. We might talk a bit about the online and face-to-face purchase environments, and I'm going to encourage you to do a bit extra reading about that. And finally, we'll talk about how consumer behaviour theories can explain how consumers respond to marketing and purchase stimuli in that purchase environment. So we started last week talking about the Engel, Collett and Blackwell model of decision making, and we talked about problem recognition, information search and evaluation of alternatives, and we started talking about product choice, but the focus of today is really going to be on product choice and post-purchase outcomes. And by the end of this 2 weeks, you should really have a good understanding of how this sort of decision process works, and might vary depending on the context. The conceptual map of this chapter is quite helpful for you to look at and get an overview of what we're reading about this week. So there's essentially 5 contextual effects that influence our purchase behaviour, purchase being that fourth step in the decision-making process. And we can talk about purchase as being planned or impulse sort of purchasing. There's a bit of a spectrum there. We're going to talk about what each of these 5 things as we move through today. And then we can talk about post-purchase processes and what happens at that post-purchase phase of decision-making. So once we own a product, things aren't finished. That's when we sort of make evaluations about our purchase. That our evaluations might lead to loyalty, might lead to complaining behaviour if our satisfaction isn't high. We can talk about the different types of value that we might receive from our purchase. And then we can also talk about something that's become really important in the purchase process or the decision-making process, which is disposing or disposal of goods that we don't need anymore. Okay, so I'm just going to spend a bit of time on this slide talking about our situational or contextual buying effects. Okay, so the situational influences or contextual buying effects are physical surroundings, social surroundings, temporal effects, antecedent states, task definition, and Solomon and his colleagues also bring in the notion of shopping orientation. So physical surroundings are those things around us when we're going to make a purchase. So it might be, and we can talk about this a bit in terms of that bricks and mortar and online space. So when we go into a store, it's what the store might, go to make a purchase. It's what the store might look like. It's how we walk through the store. It might be how it smells. It relates to sort of our senses and how that impacts on us. It might relate to any atmospherics in the store. Some organisations might, and lots of organisations try and use that to sort of brand what their store is about and to influence your purchase. So think about a high-end luxury kind of store. They tend to have lots of white space, not very much product, a specific type of lighting, and a certain type of dress in their staff, for example. But if you went into, say, a discount store, a $2 store, it's all about lots of products around. As much as they can cram onto the shelves, is about finding a bargain. So it's quite a different physical surrounding, and that has an influence on how your purchase process. And sometimes you're looking for both sort of experiences, or depending on who you are, some people seek out certain physical surroundings, but those physical surroundings also influence the way we engage. So for example, I think last time we talked about the fact that music can influence the way that we move through a store, the speed at which we can move through a store. So that's why supermarkets often have that soft, easy listening music, because it slows us down and we take more time, and as a result we spend more money. And I'm sure you can think of other environments where there's a lot more different paces of music to influence your experience there. In an online environment, this sort of might relate to the look and the feel of a website, the way it's designed. So if you go onto any of those things like, I can't think what they're called. There's lots of different sites anyway that give you the opportunity to create your own website, and you can see lots of different feels, lots of different designs, and each of those sort of conveys a certain feel. So that's kind of about your physical surroundings when somebody comes, clicks on your website. Social surroundings is really about the people who are there, the people that are in that environment at the same time as you. So that can have a bit of a different, so let's talk about it in a bricks and mortar kind of context first. So this might relate to things like the density, how many people are there at the same time as you, and whether you want a lot of people or not can have an impact. So if you went to a concert and there's no one there, it's quite a different feel to if you went to a luxury store and you wanted to have it's that individual customized kind of buying experience. There's times when you want a lot of people, and that speaks to the quality, or says something about your establishment, and there's times when you don't want people there, and that also says something about your establishment. Other things we can think about in terms of social surroundings are things like queuing, how that influences the way we move through a space. There's this other notion too of emotional contagion. Excuse me. So emotional contagion is when all of the people in a social surrounding start to experience the same feeling. So, when you're if you've been to a live show, when there's suddenly a ripple through the crowd that people know something's about to happen. Maybe people are about to come on stage. I don't know if you've ever been in a restaurant where everybody's waiting for food and the staff have got a bit behind, the kitchen's got a bit behind, and all of a sudden people move from being comfortable with not having their meal to being agitated about the fact that they don't have their meal. Another experience of this I have had is when I'm in a, say in an art gallery, for example, and people start purchasing art. And then all of a sudden it becomes a bit frenetic and everybody feels like if they need to purchase now, they're going to miss out. Okay, so let's keep moving through these. Temporal surroundings are about temporal influences are about the influence of time. So whether there's an abundance or a lack of time, how much time you have to engage in the purchase, the time of the year, the season, anything that relates to the influence of time on the way we make our purchase. So if I go shopping after school with my kids, I have a much different experience than if I go by myself before I pick up the kids from school, just simply because of the time factor, the time of day, and the time I have to engage in the process. And okay, this also leads on to antecedent states, which really relates to moods. Okay, so if we think about this in terms of, the text talks about this in terms of pleasure and arousal. States of pleasure and arousal, and they can have both a positive and a negative impact on our experience and on our behavior in our sort of purchase environment. So if we're in a negative mood, something bad's happened, that might influence our purchase. Maybe it might influence us to purchase something for comfort reasons. So think about all the online shopping going on during COVID lockdown, or that typical movie thing where you feel bad, so you buy comfort food, ice cream, for example. Or it could be something momentary, like the fact that you went to purchase something, you had every intention of doing it, but your credit card didn't work. So that's a temporary sort of antecedent state that influences your purchase behavior or what's actually happening. Okay, task definition. I'm going to have to scoot through these or we'll run out of time. Task definition comes down to why it is you're buying the product. So are you buying, let's think, wine's always a great example. Are you buying wine for your own consumption? Are you buying it for a gift for someone else? Or are you buying it, say, to take to a dinner party? Each of those different contexts might cause you to purchase a different type of wine, depending on who's going to be there, what you're doing it for. So task definition is interesting because often we talk about consumer behavior being about problem recognition. And sometimes the way we solve a problem differs. So some people might want something to get them from A to B. It might be a car, it might be a train ride, it might be a taxi, they might walk, or they might ride a bike. So there's lots of different ways to get to the destination, and the task that you're trying to engage in influences why you might choose each of those different solutions to the problem that you have. So, for example, you might choose not to walk if you were going to a business meeting, but if you had time and you didn't need, it didn't matter if you got there a little sweaty, that mightn't matter either, might vary what you did. Okay, shopping orientation is about, whether you enjoy shopping, whether you, and why you're shopping, why you're going out and engaging in that shopping experience. Sometimes it's for utilitarian reasons, so it's really about functional, tangible reasons. Other times it's about hedonic reasons. So that notion of pleasure or the intangible, the experience of shopping rather than just the need to go and purchase something. So when I talk about the groceries, that's very utilitarian for me. I'm out there trying to get the job done, but I'm really looking forward to when we get out of lockdown, having the opportunity to just go and swan about the shops, because that's that hedonic sort of experience. Okay. So we can talk about, I encourage you to go and have a read about the difference between sort of spontaneous and planned decision making. And I want you to think more about that e-commerce sort of space and that bricks and mortar space, and how that sort of changes the considerations we make as marketers in terms of how we create an environment, how we try and work with those contextual effects or situational influences, which are the same sort of thing. For example, say in a bricks and mortar space, in an online space, think about how we might use social surroundings, saying there's only, 10 people are looking at this hotel room right now. That's kind of how we're bringing in a social effect to create that sense of urgency for people. Or there, 3 other people are looking at this thing, whatever the product is or service at the moment. Okay, so the last bit of the video today, we're going to talk about post-purchase options. So we've talked about product choice and how those situational influences impact on it. And I also want you to think about when you're reading, I encourage you to go and read a little bit more about the store environment and how we can sort of influence product choice through point of purchase displays, the purchase environment, that sort of thing. Now, post-purchase outcomes. Okay, so there's essentially 4 things. You can't see product disposal because it's under me there, but satisfaction, customer value, loyalty, and product disposal are the things we consider in this phase of the decision-making process. So satisfaction is the difference between our expected performance of a product and the actual performance of a product or service. So if the offering performs better than we thought it would, we tend to be satisfied. If the offering performs as we expected, we're still satisfied. But if it performs worse than we expected, that's when dissatisfaction comes in. And that's something we need to manage as marketers and consider. That's where we need feedback loops, because we want to know when people aren't satisfied so we can try and rectify that situation. There's different values that people get. It's not always just the value of the exchange in terms of what the product's worth, but I encourage you to go and have a look at the different types of values. You can read about those sort of on page 337 to 338, talk about economic, social, hedonic, and altruistic values and think about how they differ. Loyalty and brand loyalty is something that's very interesting in terms of post-purchase outcomes, because that's what we're aiming for. Loyalty is about an emotional attachment to a product or an offering or a service, and also that repeat purchase, which is the important bit. And people will also promote something they feel loyal to. So loyalty can be a really vital thing for an organisation, but it depends whether you want that or not. There's times when you don't, and I'd encourage you to look at that. Finally, for product disposal, that's something that we could spend a lot of time talking about, and I encourage you to read and think about. So there's lots of, when it comes to getting rid of a product, sometimes that can influence our choice to purchase something, but also things like recycling, the packaging that products are in, the ability to upcycle, the ability to pass something on are all things that we consider as part of our decision process. And increasingly, disposal is influencing people's purchase as they think about things like sustainability. So have a read about all of those things. I think the one thing I was going to say, now I encourage you to go online and just use the search terms in Google Scholar, online consumer behaviour, and just have a read of some of the articles there that talk about the difference between the online and offline space or bricks and mortar space and how that influences our consumer behaviour. That's pretty much everything we're going to cover today. I've covered it fairly quickly, but I encourage you to go and spend a bit of time thinking about what you do and then thinking about how your knowledge of all of these things and this decision process might influence your choices as a marketer. For example, it might influence how you segment the market into people that care about sustainable disposal and those that don't, I guess. There's lots going on in that space at the moment with products without plastic. Think about shampoo bars. There's lots going on there that I think is really interesting to have a look at. And I encourage you to go and investigate that a bit more. Okay, thanks guys for today, and feel free to contact me with any questions.